Welcome to the Awakening Together YouTube channel. This is our Awakening Together live satsang with Dorothy Hunt. If you'd like other information about our non-dual programs we have, please visit our website awakening-together.org. We'd love to see you there in the sanctuary.
Thank you, Sina. Good evening, everybody. It is Sunday, September 19th, 2021, for those who listen to this 10 years from now. I just wanted to tell you I'm delighted to see everybody here, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to interview Dr. Dorothy Hunt, who is joining us this evening from California. So it is 4:30 her time, and it is 3:30 Eastern time. And for those of you who don't know Dorothy Hunt, I'm just going to do a quick reading about Dorothy, and then I'm going to tell you, and then we're going to start interviewing. And before we get anywhere too far down the road, I just also want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are open for questions at any point that you feel called to ask a question. I will trust that I don't need to ask a question and that you are the one to take the mic. So if you have questions for Dorothy, anything that you want to talk about relative to your spiritual pursuits, or just about Dorothy and her practices, please feel free to join us. So with that said, a quick introduction to Dorothy Hunt. In case you didn't get to read about Dorothy, she happens to be the spiritual director of Moon Mountain Sangha, and she teaches at the request of Adyashanti. She's also the founder of the San Francisco Center for Meditation and Psychotherapy, and a practice psychotherapist from 1967 to 2020, which I just can't wait to talk to you about, Dorothy. I can't imagine not having a psychotherapy practice in the middle of all this craziness, but that should be interesting. She's also the author of Leaves from Moon Mountain, Only This, and Ending the Search from Spiritual Ambition to the Heart of Awareness, as well as many articles about non-dual teaching and psychotherapy in various books and journals. She has a deep connection to Ramana Maharshi and the path of self-inquiry, as well as non-dual teachings of Zen, Advaita, and Christian mystics. When she met Adyashanti, she was invited beyond identification with the absolute, with either the absolute or relative, finding freedom in what is awake in each of us, regardless of what changing faces of experience. Sounds very familiar. Sounds like something that Regina was just trying to show us, doesn't it? So with that being said, I'm going to ask Sina, would you mind spotlighting Dorothy? Thank you. Welcome, Dorothy. We didn't get a chance to check our audio, but this will be our audio check. What do you think?
Well, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just perfectly. Perfect.
You gave me a doctorate that I actually don't have, so I just want to make that correction.
Oh, well, thank you. You know what? I read psychotherapist, and there was an assumption made. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
That is interesting, though. And so that does bring me to my very first question, which is, it would be really lovely. I don't know how many people are here that actually know a whole lot about you, and although I just read your brief bio, it would be really lovely to understand a little bit about what brought you to the spiritual path and what your journey has looked like.
Sure, I'll be happy to share a little bit. I mean, as I do, I want to emphasize that each one of us has a unique path to this moment, right? In terms of whatever causes and conditions have arisen in our lives. And so the story is not so important as what's actually here now, but I'm happy to tell you a bit about the story. When I was a child, my mother died, and I was brought up in a Christian family and was told that it was God who gives life and takes it away. So I was not happy with this God who took away my mother's life, and yet I also had read the saying in the New Testament, if you have faith even as big as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Well, as a child, I actually thought I had faith way bigger than a mustard seed. And so my mother died the day after Christmas, and the next April was her birthday on Easter Sunday. So I prayed every single day deeply that she would be resurrected, like the stories of Jesus on Easter, set a place for her at the table and so forth. Well, as you can imagine, there was a great disappointment on Easter Sunday when this did not materialize. And at that point, I just got really angry. I got really angry with my idea of God. And so I wanted to find out who that was, what that was. And it was that kind of began, it feels like, at least in this life dream, it was that began a search, really, for God. I wasn't searching for myself at that point, but for God. And my life continued to unfold. I got married, I had kids. I went to school and got a graduate degree in psychiatric social work. So that's how I happened to become a psychotherapist. But the interest in spirituality continued. And I don't know about any of you, but I was going to a Protestant church at the time where they had a moment of silent prayer. And literally, it was only a moment, less than 30 seconds. There were plenty of words, plenty of music, but that silence was not really emphasized. So it felt important to me. I got a little book that said, if you were Christian, you could meditate on a passage of scripture. So I chose from Psalms, be still and know that I am God. And that began many, many years of meditation in different forms of meditation. But the beginning really came around to the ending as well. And Regina was speaking about it in terms of being still and knowing, So in that passage of scripture, there would just be sitting with each word. Be. What is it like to just be? What is it like to be still? What is it like to be still and know that? What is it like to be still and know that I, or that I am, or that I am God? And so that was the beginning of meditation. I also did mantra meditation for a while, and was interested in during meditation, I should say, it came to me to do something with Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa Sisters. So I called them up, and that began about 10 years of volunteering with the homeless, with a home for pregnant women, soup kitchen, and so forth. And I met Mother Teresa on many occasions. I never was in India with her, but there was something in the very first meeting with Mother Teresa that was so powerful. She just took my face in her hands like this. And there was a look of such love. I know a lot of other things about Mother Teresa and her sisters that aren't like that moment, because I know them well from inside and out. But that moment was transformative in the sense that I felt like a single moment could change a life. That power of love was just penetrating, just absorbed and so forth. So the psychotherapy part, I was on retreat at one point with Thich Nhat Hanh, a Zen Buddhist monk from Vietnam, and And that was a great teaching too, because if any of you are familiar with him, his whole demeanor, the way he walks, the way he talks, the way his presence is in the world, just exemplified peace. And he wrote quite a bit about peace. But one of the first things he asked all of us who were all psychotherapists, it was in the Rocky Mountains, he said, is peace boring? He said, peace is always present, but we find it boring. And so we would rather be entertained or, have addictions or watch television. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, well, I'm not keen on addiction, but there's nothing wrong with, watching television or reading books or whatever. But the idea is peace boring because as Regina was inviting us in that meditation to pay attention to the stillness and silence, you begin to realize, anyone who's tried to meditate thinking that there should be nothing but the stillness and silence, the first thing we find out, right, is that the mind often is quite busy and we're not really interested often in the stillness and the silence. And yet, I would add one thing to what she was speaking about earlier, and that is that silence and stillness also carries knowing. It carries that which is aware, right? So what knows that your mind is busy? If it knows, what knows what you're feeling? What knows, what you're looking at, what you're hearing, what your judgments are, and so forth. There's something that's constant, that's not only aware, but it also is the knowing of experience. And that's been with us for forever, really. We don't pay attention to it. It's so much a part of our daily life, that we often don't recognize how powerful and profound that dimension of our being is, that still, silent, open, unjudging awareness, true nature. None of those words are it. I like to call this that we're pointing to the mystery. But at any rate, that's a little bit away from the story, but I will try to weave it in quickly. So at some point in all of this, I had a dream of an Indian guru, Ramana Maharshi, who I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know if he was dead or alive. But the power, in fact, I brought a picture just in case you don't know. I don't know if you can see this picture, but this is the face that appeared in this dream. And there was such a profound love and radiance that I just knew I had to find out something about him. And so I began reading the spiritual teachings of Ramana Maharshi. And it was as if I was exposed at that point to the deepest or purest truth that I had ever even been in contact with until that time. And Ramana's main practice that he recommended was self-inquiry. Who am I? What am I? And he said, which is true, almost every other kind of meditation requires a belief in a self that's somehow separate from what we're seeking. But self-inquiry is an invitation of our mind to try to find its source. So the spiritual seeker is looking for something that he or she believes is not here now. But who is that seeker? And where did this spiritual impulse come from? Do you know? Whose is it? How did it begin? And so forth. So that began a period for me of not sitting on a cushion, who am I? Who am I? It can get very intellectual if people try to do self-inquiry in that way. But for me, it was just spontaneous, like who's sitting with her client right now? Who's looking at herself in the mirror? Who's feeling anxious? Just these little moments where that question would appear. Not how do I get rid of this or how do I change this, but who's feeling it? Who's thinking it? Who's doing it? Who is that? Who is that? And as that inquiry continued, there was just a gradual quieting of the mind, as though in that question, something turned around. That which was looking out began to look in. And that's powerful when that turns around. And some of you probably know that. You know, you've been seeking God or happiness or peace or whatever, and it feels like it's your doing. But then there's a moment where it feels like it's turning around, and now whatever that mystery is, call it God, call it Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, it turns around and it's coming for you. And here's where people can become a little frightened, because you realize you're not doing it. It's just happening. This impulse, this deep, deep desire for truth, or most people really come to the spiritual search as a way of trying to get out of suffering. That's not a bad reason, but very few come because there's just the deep desire for truth. However, in this search, when it actually becomes more important to see the truth than to have things look a certain way, things begin to unfold in a different way. Because now it's not, I'm trying to get someplace, I'm trying to become a better whoever, I'm trying to get rid of these thoughts and feelings and only have those thoughts and feelings. No, I just want the truth. That deep desire for truth. And it begins to show itself. It begins to show itself. So, you know, after some years actually of doing self-inquiry, there was a moment that was what I would call an initial awakening experience. Now, awakening experiences aren't the same as living awake, but they are profound and meaningful and life-changing. They can be, because in that moment, or maybe it's just comes easily for some people. Maybe they came in almost knowing this or remembering our true nature. But for some, it's very dramatic. And it was at that moment where that realization, recognition came, that identity shifted, you know? So we wake up and out, we might say, into the transcendent, and kind of knowing that you are that, essentially, you know? And then sometimes it's so free there. It's so open and so vast. You know, we think, as I did at that time, well, that's it. I'm done. That's pretty funny at this point, because it's just the first step. It's just the first step. So there's an awakening up and out, but then it comes down and in. And then there's awakening of the heart. There's awakening of the hara, those deeper dimensions of the body mind that hold identification. But some years, it was years after that initial remembering that so transformed everything, really, and my really arrogant thinking that, well, that's it, because I felt that was the end of seeking, and it truly was. It was the end of the search. However, I had yet to meet, at least in this life dream, Adyashanti. But we both were speaking at the same conference. And so when he began to speak, I just felt this transmission that I knew I needed. And very soon I was invited to go on retreat with him, and so forth and so on. And in meeting Adyashanti, he let us know that awakening is just halfway around the circle, you know, awakening to the absolute, just halfway around the circle. Now, how does it want to embody itself? How does it want to be lived in your experience and mine? And that's an ongoing exploration, because in the infinite that you are, the infinite that I am, how could there be an end to the exploration, to the coming into deeper and deeper recognition of various aspects? So, you know, this up and out, waking up, then there's a down and in, waking up. And when the heart awakens, that's when it becomes much more intimate. This can be really impersonal. I mean, it's really impersonal anyway, the whole thing, if we're going to be honest. It's intimate, however, which is why it makes it feel like there's a separate somebody, because it feels so personal. But it's just so intimate, because this that we are, this that's awake in you, is intimate with experience. So this heart opening, you know, there's love, there's compassion, there's gratitude, there's the expression of beauty, there's this intimacy I'm talking about, and oneness. You know, it's the connectedness that we feel through the heart. And you know, often I've invited meditations with folks to, and I've used Ramana's invitation for parts where he said, enter with love the temple that is your own heart. Maybe you'd just like to do that with me now for a few minutes. So enter with love the temple that is your own heart, silently allowing the deep within to flow on and into the deep beyond. Enter with love the temple that is your own heart. And so just as Regina was inviting us to notice, to put attention to the silence, I would invite you to put attention to the heart. And this isn't just the heart that's beating in your chest, it's the heart that we share, the heart that Ramana called the self. Buddha called it no self. Someone will call it something else, but the name is not it. But in order to really enter this temple, we have to go in naked, not carrying anything. So just for a moment, I would just invite you to leave at the door your memories, the idea of who you are, your judgments, your beliefs. We can pick them up later, they'll still be here. But just for this little experiential moment, see if you can just leave those at the door, as though they're in a backpack that you just leave at the door in order to enter with nothing except the desire to enter into this heart that we share. And it's quiet. You might find that you have barriers that seem to come up because you've been hurt or you felt abandoned or whatever, and so that heart and love don't feel safe. But that's all right, because those things are welcomed in the heart as well. And your awareness, this silent awareness, can go anywhere, so it has no barriers. So we're just inviting your own awareness into an experience of this awakened heart. And you come silently, carrying nothing with you, to the extent that that's possible. Not because anything is wrong with all those things you left outside the door, but because you're entering a sacred, sacred temple of yourself, where nothing is needed. You come empty-handed. You don't need to be perfected. You don't need to have gotten rid of anything in your life. You come exactly as you are, and you enter. And perhaps you begin to feel that there's a depth there and a peace there that's yours. It's not outside of you. You've entered your own heart, and this heart connects us with the entire universe. And perhaps at some point now or later, if you're interested, you can drop a question into this space, this quiet, empty, peaceful, vast space, loving space, the space of loving awareness. You can drop a question. Who or what am I, really? When I leave, just even for a moment, everything that comes and goes, There's still something here. What am I? Who am I? What's noticing my experience right now? Who or what is that? So we could go on and I would invite you to explore on your own. We don't have unlimited time now, but we don't really need time in order to touch the timeless. So what we're inviting ourselves to is this timeless dimension of ourself that's always present. Even as we sleep, it's present. Something is awake and aware even when the body is asleep. What is that? Who is that? When you are sleeping, if you don't dream, there is no body, there's no world, there's no other, there's no God, there's no idea of God. What is there that can leave us feeling so nourished and rested if we've had a good sleep? I would propose the mind is resting in true nature. It's resting in this heart of awareness, without the names, without the concepts, just this mystery that the mind will never know because it's not an object. We can't know it as we would know something that you read in a book. This is an experience of yourself. With a capital S. So feel free to open your eyes if you've had them closed. And I think I'll be quiet for a little while because I haven't allowed you to ask me any other questions. Forgive me.
Dorothy, you could have gone on and on. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sure there's not a person in the room. That meditation was glorious.
Well, bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. You said, you talked about the awakening experience not being the same as living awake.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you would say a little more about how that sort of transitions from the awakening experience into the living being awake.
Sure. Well, many of you, I'm sure, have had moments that are glorious moments where it feels like this is it. It feels peaceful. It feels expansive. Perhaps you've had experiences where you know that something has awakened up out of the usual constricted identity. And we think that's it. That is it. And it's true, that's it. But we don't realize that everything else is it also. So some people will live a lifetime trying to have a state, try to come back to a state, a state of peacefulness or openness or whatever. And there's no freedom, really. There is not a great freedom when we're looking for something outside of now, because now is the only time, that's not really time, that we can be awake. It's in the moment in which we find ourselves. And where are we? We're always here. Some of you probably remember Ram Dass's first book, Be Here Now. Your being is always here, and it's always in the now. And this now is not a little moment sandwiched between past and future. It's this, I would say, this vertical dimension of ourself, that's timeless. And it's a dimension that we have access to if we spend some time noticing. And if we're interested, we don't have to be interested. But to live awake is to be open to what's here right now. So some of you may have gone on meditation retreats. I went on quite a few. And some of them are glorious, and some of them feel like they're retreats from hell. Everything you wished would be gone comes back up. You think, oh my God, I thought I took care of that in therapy years ago, and here it is again. I can't believe it. What have I done wrong? Why have I lost what I had? But these are really important experiences, because what the invitation is to discover what's actually here in every experience. The ones the mind considers good, and the one that the mind considers really challenging or painful. There's something that's here through every experience for each of us. We may not be aware so much. We may not be aware that the power and freedom of our true nature is not someplace else, because we're trying to be someplace else. We don't want the experience that's here. And so we want to have another one. And that's normal if you're in pain, but trying to get rid of something just increases its attempt to come back into the wholeness and fullness of being. It's as if all these creatures or these childhood traumas or whatever, they just keep knocking at the door, and then we open the door and say, not you again, and slam it, and what they're really looking for is to come back home, come back to the heart. Come back into the openness, come back into the fold. Let the feelings be as they are, not as we've interpreted them. And so living awake is the experience is letting everything be as it is, which doesn't say anything about the next moment. But it isn't about this shouldn't be here if it's already here. And so there's an unbelievable freedom in that one thinks prior to having such an experience that kind of freedom will only be here when all the things I want to be rid of are gone, and there's only unlimited and unending bliss and peace and joy. But life is whole, isn't it? It has joy and suffering, and it has this thing called this human experience, So part of the what word would I use? Part of the unfolding, at least here, has been recognizing that not only are the thoughts like clouds passing in the sky, but the sky and the clouds are the same essence, the same ground, the same source. Everything that's arising, all of creation comes out of this source that we all share. It's like a field that's filled with many, many different kinds of flowers and things we'd call weeds and so forth. But the ground that out of which it comes, the nurturing of everything comes from the same ground. And so you begin to have a different relationship with what's arising, because you see that too is an expression of the infinite. So one of the things that Ramana Maharshi said that I think if people really understood this, it would end so much suffering. He said, there's only the self, the heart, whatever word we're going to use. There's only the self. When unlimited, it's the absolute. When limited, it's the ego. We don't think of them as the same thing, do we? We think of them as very different. And then so many spiritual traditions are saying ego is the enemy. We have to get rid of it. We have to kill. How am I going to kill my ego? I've got to do this or that to try to get rid of it. It actually is what we call ego is a movement of thought. The thought that believes in separation. The thought that thinks your idea of I is really the true I. But it isn't, it holds a self-image. And that's why no matter what your self-image might be, I'm a terrible person or I'm the best thing since sliced bread, an image will never really fulfill anyone, because it's not who we are. We're not an image. We're what's behind the image. So if you can imagine, this is how I kind of envision it, but we're just using words and they will always fail. Adyashanti says, he said, trying to use words to to point. We'll always fail. We just try to fail as well as we can. So that's what I'm trying to do tonight. Fail as well as possible. But imagine this awake, aware mystery. It's everywhere. It's a self-aware universe. Through you, it gets to see itself as a tree or a flower or a child or a feeling. It sees through your eyes, because the seeing is what we're looking for. I think it was St. Francis of Assisi said, that which you're looking for is what's looking. So there's this awareness that moves into its own creation as this body mind, and becomes what we would call consciousness of, it's conscious of thoughts, it's conscious of feelings, but it's never actually separated from this that's vast, and it's what we share. And if you look into the eyes of a newborn baby, or your beloved partner, or maybe your dog, or your cat. Cats don't usually like you to look into their eyes. But anyway, we won't go there. But if you look into the eyes intently, without any agenda, you'll see that something is present to itself. Something's looking. The looking itself doesn't have an identity. It's just the looking. And so if we were in person, I might ask you, is there anything that's really dividing, your looking from my looking? Now, we have a lot of ideas. Well, you're there and I'm here, and, we're different people, and I don't know your thoughts and you don't know. But the looking itself, is it really divided? So when you come to the recognition that all the things that we wanted not to be here are also expressions of the one, at least from my understanding, it's the one that's playing all the parts. And it becomes much more difficult to judge when you know that. It's not to say judgments don't arise, they do, but we don't have to believe them, we can see them for what they are. So to live awake, I think, is to also be led by the obviousness of the moment. One of the most surprising things was just the lack of an agenda, the lack of ambition to do something or get something or become known or, whatever. All of that kind of vanishes when you realize that life is living itself. Being is being itself. And it's always becoming, being is always becoming, just like you and I are always becoming. And yet we're simultaneously being. So some of you may have had this experience, and it's quite amazing. You're in the midst of a feeling that prior to your own recognition, remembering, realization, whatever, would have thrown you into great despair or judgment or whatever. But as it's happening, there's also something that's seeing it so clearly with just compassion and love. And it's not judging. It's not saying, oh, you're a terrible person because you had that thought, or you're not spiritual because, you have a moment of fear, or whatever these things are that we have this idea, awakening will look like my idea of it. And I would just encourage all of us just to recognize that you're already awake, number one, because you are that which is awake. And then see if all these fantasies are really the case. Maybe you'll find out some of them are, some of them aren't, I don't know. But the willingness not to know is another, I think, big part of living awake. It's okay not to know. Our whole education system has been, the importance of knowing, knowing. And then we feel safe because we know. And so it becomes challenging sometimes to live in not knowing. And yet there again, what you find is when you realize what you deeply are, that you are a divine being, whoever it is you are, then you have trust. our true nature doesn't need to trust anything. It's just the mind that's worried about trusting. But there's a trust then in the greater picture. And of course, there's all kinds of horrible things that are happening in this world of duality. And non-duality is not at war with duality. Duality is how it sees itself, experiences itself, knows itself, confuses itself, as at war with itself. You know, there's great drama in the dual world. We have only to turn on the news, read the newspaper. Incredible drama, and there's something that's not threatened by it, that's not attached to it, and there's peace there. Do you know? Does that give you any more
Yes, that
moments of clarity? Okay.
that was incredibly valuable, and I think what it brings me to next is the illusion itself. And you referred to this, I believe, when you were speaking of Thich Nhat Hanh, excuse me.
Yeah.
That I believe what was said, and forgive me if I'm misquoting, was that peaceful seems to be boring. So there's this, what I'm noticing, and I don't know that I'm alone, but there's this constant, pull, push in the interiority that feels like, fall back into the self. We know we're awake. We know this.
Mm-hmm.
And the illusion is just magnificently catching attention all the time.
Well, if we don't think that should never happen, then it doesn't have the same power, right? I mean, a thought is seen to be a thought, a feeling is a feeling, and the thought is thinking itself. Because each of us has this little voice inside, we think that voice is something that's separate. It's just the thinking is thinking itself. I sometimes think about it as, we're like on a tour bus with all the shades pulled. We're not actually seeing what's here. We're just listening to the tour guide. And the tour guide is this conditioned mind, right? Just telling us what is and what isn't, and what should be and what shouldn't be. And, it's quite engaged in life always. And we're not going to get rid of all of our conditioning. It's part of our biological makeup. It's part of our psychological makeup. A lot of it will go, but there are things that probably won't go. And it's not that they're there that's a problem. It's our identification with them. So if you're not identified with the part of you that loves to be distracted, then, there'll be moments where you let yourself be distracted, right? I'm a sports fan, and I watch the San Francisco teams with great enthusiasm and disappointment, but my happiness doesn't depend on them winning, right? But there's an engagement with life, however it shows up as each of us, and some of us are into exercise or into art or music or whatever, and just letting life be itself through us, not trying to suppress what's natural, our natural way of being in the world. When people say, well, just be yourself, they're not just talking about the absolute view. And I used to think that, early on. I used to think, well, then we'll all be like Ramana Maharshi, and we'll just be, this perfect example of the absolute, so to speak. But we're here to be ourselves. We're here to be this particular expression, moment to moment, and it feels like the more you recognize each flower is an expression of the infinite, the more you appreciate the particularities, whether it's the taste of a cup of tea or, a flower or a person or or even a moment of, that feels a little bit shaky to the human thing. There's just a way in which this that we are seems to let everything be as it is with love.
Yes. That is very clarifying. Thank you. I just want to pause for a moment and just remind anyone who feels to ask a question. If you raise your hand, I can see it. If you raise your hand electronically, I can see it. But if you raise your hand like this, I might not see it. So I encourage you to raise your hand electronically. Otherwise, Sina, I'm sure, will let us know if someone's raising their hand. All right. So where that points to next for my particular listening, what's happening here right now, is questions around purification. So, some teachers teach that purification is a valuable tool for helping to remain more steadfastly in the seat of awareness. So I'm curious, is that a tool that how do you see that in the practice?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a tool. I would call it, this is the way that life will move. And, I would call it the fire of truth. And it can feel like fire sometimes. I mean, where something's coming in and it's just exposing every place that we're holding on to separation. It's, and it shows you, even if you tried very hard to have a very spiritual self-image and you were always trying to do the right thing and so forth, this will come in and show you the falsity places, where there's a trying instead of just being it, oh, I'm trying to be holy, but you can see through it from this that's awakening you, but it doesn't judge it. It just shows it to you clearly. And this is a time that I would call it a time of purification. And it's also a time of humbling. We're very humbled when this starts to happen. It feels like, oh, I had these great experiences and this recognition and remembrance. And now, oh my gosh, everything's just exploding or whatever. And I sometimes call it the blessed mess of embodiment, because it can be messy. It can be. It doesn't have to be. It's not for everyone probably, but some of us have more stuff than others. It's just the way it is. And there's no use complaining about it because we're given what we're given. We come into wherever we come into. So that to me, it happens. But when people say, well, in order to purify myself, I have to get rid of all desire, so how am I going to get rid of all desire? Well, if you're thirsty, you desire water. If you've been sitting in front of the computer all day, you desire to get up and move around. There's an obviousness that comes out of natural desires, And if you have a desire for truth, then truth is going to come sweeping in whatever ways it does. And it will show you the places where I call them the holdouts. And we all have those places of holdouts, places where we really believe our judgments are actually truth. Yeah? Our judgments about the other political party or the people who are getting vaccinated, people aren't getting vaccinated, their judgments like, and then we believe that we hold the truth based on beliefs. But can you see, and some beliefs are more useful than others, some ideas are more useful than others. It's not that they're all wrong or bad, but in terms of really discovering the truth for yourself, you won't find it in a belief. It will show itself to itself. It's like there's no separate one to be awakened or to be enlightened. Enlightenment is what we are, what this world is, we could say, even though it doesn't look that way. It's not what you become, it's what you already are if you have the eyes to see, if you have those moments of grace that show you that you are what you're seeking. So I just think it's a natural process of awakening. you know, and sometimes it happens prior to, and sometimes there's a lot that happens after. And it's usually, you know, if you have a choice, it's easier to tackle some of these places or these aspects of yourself that are fighting, that are in resistance to truth. When you have a sense that it's all held in this heart of awareness, in this loving presence that you are, you know, then it becomes much easier to face into it. But sometimes you just have to, as they say, put your head in the dragon's mouth, you know, and see if it's going to kill you, because you have to know, you know, you were running away from whatever for your whole life. And then you realize, keep running away and it keeps coming back. So maybe I get curious. Okay, what is it really? What is the experience that I'm running from? What is it? Is it going to actually kill me? And it takes courage. It takes courage in those moments to face into it. But that's what brings us freedom. To realize what it's made of. What is fear made of, for instance? You know, there are a lot of beliefs, and those beliefs create bodily sensations and feelings. And I'm not talking about the fear that's natural. If the bus is coming right at you and you jump out of the way, you know, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about psychological fears. And those are hard. And sometimes we need help with looking into the things that are so hard to be with ourselves.
So it sounds to me like you would say that purification is going to happen if your desire is to know truth. Purification is going to happen one way or another.
Life will do it, yeah.
Life will do it. And there's a whole lot of we are not doing it, I think is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, the ego mind doesn't like the idea of not being in control. But all of us, sooner or later, will come up against something that we know we're not in control of. Do you know? And then what? Do you know? And then what? And then we can fight it, or we can look more deeply. Do you know? We can look and see, is life living itself, or am I in charge? And people have this idea, well, if I wake up, or if enlightenment should happen, then, you know, my kids won't be taken care of. I won't be able to do my job. You know, I'll just have to run off to India and live in an ashram or whatever. You know, and there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things. But the fact of the matter is, it's a ploy to keep us unenlightened. You know, the fear that life isn't going to happen in the way that we think it should happen, or the way that we have been taught that we're in charge of it. And this sense of agency is, it's a tricky thing to talk about, because when you take a seat in yourself, and I just invite all of you right now, I mean, just feel what it's like to take a seat in yourself. Don't have to have a definition of that self, just to take a seat in your home ground, let's say, you know, you take a seat there. And when you're there, there's a sense of agency in the world that isn't egoically driven. Do you know? If you need to set a boundary, if you need to get something done, if something is pressing on you and the decision has to be made, it will happen. But it will happen from that deeper dimension of ourself. Do you know? It will happen in big things, and it will happen in small things if we listen, you know, and listening is so important. You listen to that inner voice, because we all have an inner guru, an inner teacher, inner God or goddess, whatever words work for you, that lives not someplace outside, but in your own consciousness, you know. And there's a wisdom and a love that can flow when we're quiet enough to listen to its wisdom and its love. Yeah.
Thank you. What keeps coming back up here is something that I had not heard before. I don't know if anyone else here had ever heard this before, but when you spoke these words, you said that if Ramana Maharshi had said, if everyone and you then pointed that if we had all understood this, the world would be a much different place. And I'm amazed in this moment, I think is the right word. Amazed in this moment. And I want to make sure that I actually heard correctly.
Well, I said there would be so much less suffering, which of course would change the world. I mean, there is joy in suffering. I mean, there are children suffering in the world who live in poverty and have no food and are starving, you know? So even if they understood that they were the divine expression, you know, that would not end that suffering. So it's not about something so global in that sense, but our own suffering is what we project onto the world. So if we're separated here, then I'm going to be separated there. And if I think my beliefs are the only ones that should exist, then I'm going to be, you know, fighting you and your beliefs if they're different from mine. So to know that we're individual in the sense of being unique expressions, but we're not separate expressions. You know, the same thing that's animating you is animating me, the same spirit, the same awareness, the same heart that we can share if we tap into that dimension. And my own experience, and maybe this is because I worked for so many years as a psychotherapist, but the type of suffering, the type of psychological suffering that we do by self-judgment is unbelievable. I sometimes have thought, you know, if you were at a restaurant and there was a couple, that was back in the time where we could go to restaurants without having to have our masks on. Okay, just imagine that time. Okay, but if you were at a restaurant and there was a couple or two people at a table nearby talking to each other as you sometimes talk to yourself, you would get up and leave. It would be so disturbing, you know, the kinds of self-judgment and self-incrimination and recrimination and shame and guilt and on and on and on that we put on ourselves because we don't understand who we are, what we are. Do you know? It doesn't mean we don't all have places in ourselves that could use, as Suzuki Roshi, a Buddhist monk who lived and worked in California for lots of his life until his death. But he said to his students one day, he came into the Zendo and he was giving a talk and he said, you know, each of you is perfect exactly the way you are. And you could all use a little improvement. And see, that's the paradox. Do you know? We don't just pretend like, you know, those places that give us pain and suffering and the ones we want to put in the closet, never look at again. We don't pretend they're not there. But the way that we're relating to them, it can shift, and it can shift to a curiosity and a willingness to know the truth about it. Not in a sense of I have to know where everything came from, because are you ever going to know where everything came from? I mean, from my perspective, the causes and conditions of just this moment that we're in, they go back to beginningless time. Do you know? Before your birth, before my birth, before our parents' birth, before, you know, on and on and on, you know, something has continued to flow and flow and flow, you know, and our lives are that flow. As Nisargadatta said once, you know, my life is like a river that flows between the banks of pain and pleasure. And we don't have a problem until we get stuck or we want to get stuck on one bank or the other. You know, I only want pleasure. And therefore, if there's any pain, you know, I'm completely off the grid, so to speak, or I'm so identified with being a victim of pain that I'm not open at all to the beauty and the simple pleasures that may already and always, you know, be available. One of the things that I think helps people so much to be expanded is spending time in nature, you know, A lot of us feel like, oh, yeah, that's where I can feel a part of everything. That's where I can feel the vastness or the beauty or the love or whatever. And part of it to me is because the trees and the river and the ocean and the flowers, they're not expecting anything of us. We can just be. The tree is not judging us. So we don't have that same, oh, I wonder how it will feel if I say this, or I wonder how she'll be if I don't accept her invitation, or, all those interpersonal things, they don't exist to my knowledge when we're in nature. It just lets everything be. And that's, I think, our true nature is like that. It lets everything be because it knows that it's living its own life, its own evolution, however that is. And sometimes it's challenging. That's the truth of life as well.
I appreciate you pointing to the acceptance of that non-duality does not reject duality. That is a very helpful pointer. The thing that comes up that I keep noticing is this constant rejection of the duality. That not constant, it's not constant, but there is a fair amount of rejection of duality, that it should only be this way and not this way. And you said something about putting your head into the dragon's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And that it intrigued me as a sort of a question of what value would there be in putting, every time something just uncomfortable comes up, to just be in it instead of trying to fight it. Is that what you're referring to when you say put your head in the dragon's mouth?
Well, we all have core beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
and no matter how deep our recognition, remembering, awakening might be, the core beliefs that we have about a self that came from way back when, they're incredibly difficult to unwind often. They'll keep coming back. And you see this in even certain spiritual teachers that I know you've all heard about or read about, who seem to have the capacity to really invite people to deeper and deeper states of awakened life, but they're not very mature. And so they sleep with their students, or they ask for all the money that you have. There's that aspect that hasn't matured psychologically, emotionally. These are two different paths. The path of awakening doesn't automatically say that you'll be mature. You can be awake and have had a lot of stuff here, or you can have worked on that stuff and not be very interested in, what's awake in you, and so forth and so on. But the head in the dragon's mouth, it comes from a story of Milarepa, a Tibetan teacher, who told the story anyway of how he was in his little hut and all these demons came knocking at the door, crashing the door, and of course the first thing he kind of knew to do was to invite them in for tea. So he invited the demons in for tea, but then he thought, well, they're there, I really should tell them about the Dharma. So he started talking about, spiritual stuff, blah, 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 and a few of them left, and then he tried, some other methods to, get them to leave. And finally, they all left except for one. And that one was the biggest demon of all. And that one would not leave at all. So he said, okay, I just have to find out. So he put his head in the demon's mouth. And what I'm talking about is looking at it directly, letting yourself feel it directly, the direct experience, not your idea of it, but what is it like to feel those feelings that maybe we were too immature or unsupported to be able to allow. And, sometimes that's the case. But at some point, they're going to come back because they want to be released back into the wholeness of your being itself. You know, they don't want to stand outside the door. So it's that willingness to get curious about the knotty places, you know, not to get rid of them. I mean, one of the ways that I invite people who are having difficult feelings is to locate it in your body. Do you know? If you're feeling sadness, you'll often feel it here in the heart. If you're feeling anger, it can be in the gut often. You know, so okay, where are you feeling this feeling? And then just a simple invitation. See if you can just allow your awareness to go directly inside the feeling. Not look at it from the outside, but directly inside, because awareness has no boundaries. It can go anywhere. I mean, look at us on the night sky. You know, we see billions of stars and galaxies. You know, awareness doesn't have any bounds. You know, so it's true for our feelings as well. So can you allow your awareness just to go right inside with no attempt to change anything? And that's the big thing. No attempt to change it and no judgment. You're just going to let awareness be there. And almost immediately there'll be a softening just because we're no longer resisting. You know, we're not pushing something away. And then sometimes things will be discovered or insights will be had, but not because we're trying to get rid of something, but we're willing to just see it for what it is. And then sometimes, and in Buddhism, we call this the transmutation of emotions. But if you're actually inside, if awareness is inside a feeling and you're very, very, very still, you can sometimes have the experience that what's delivered is kind of the other side of an emotion, of a feeling. For instance, anger. The other side of anger could be great clarity. You know, the other side of, you know, a feeling of lack could be great generosity. I mean, these are just possibilities. You have to find it for yourself. But you can see the essential quality of even the things that you think shouldn't be there, because everything is a portal. Everything is a gateway. Everything is a doorway to our true nature. And if we go deep enough, we can't help but bump into our true nature because it's underneath everything. It's what everything is arising out of. You know, that stillness, that silence, that awake, aware knowingness, that mystery of simply being. It's not someplace else. It's here, but there are layers. And you have to be willing to go through those layers, you know, like anger often is a great defense against feeling vulnerable, you know, and if you go through anger, you'll find sadness perhaps, or you'll find vulnerability, or you'll go back down, you'll go down, 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 down. And what you may come up against is a belief that you would rather be a fill in the blank kind of person than to look into the fact that you don't actually exist in the way that you think you are, that, you know, something else may be living you. You're not necessarily the God. You know, the mind is an incredible servant of the divine, but it's not the God. So, you know, that willingness to be nobody and to be everybody, you know, and that feels like that's what one can discover if one is able and willing, and the timing is right to just dive. It's like the ocean thing, you know, you can just stay in the waves, or you can go a little under the waves and you can feel the current, your life current. But if you keep going down, 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 eventually you'll get to the very bottom where it's really quiet and it's really still. It's really peaceful. And you realize, oh my gosh, all of these other dimensions of my being, all these other levels, they're made of the same thing. You know, they're not separate. They're not different. You know? It's the same ocean water, the same ocean of awareness, I would say, if you want to use words. But I think it's wise to realize that no matter what words we use, the words are not the thing. The sun is coming in my window. Can you just, I'm just seeing myself
It's fabulous.
in
Actually,
this little thing. It's like,
to the light, Dorothy. That's what rising up into the light. That's what's
oh
happening.
my goodness. Well, the sun is setting here in San Francisco, and it's often foggy here, so I didn't close the shades, but today the sun is coming in at any rate.
Isn't that kind of glorious?
Well, it is. And what's also glorious here in this California, at least here, we had a tiny bit of rain last night for the first time in months and months and months. Now it's not enough to put the least bit of moisture really in the ground that we're so drought ridden and fire ridden and so forth right now. But even that little bit of rain was so blessed. And then today has been super clear.
Oh, well, that's fabulous.
Yeah. Where are you, by the way, right now, Rhoda?
Right now I am in Michigan.
In Michigan. Okay.
I am northeast of Detroit. Our church is located actually online, but we are in La Veta, Colorado is where our retreat house is.
Oh, okay.
President
Okay. I grew up in Indiana, so I know a bit about Michigan.
Oh, did you? Where in
Yeah.
Indiana?
Indianapolis.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah. Great towns. Great
Yeah.
town. I do have to say that I appreciate the pointing that you are doing to, it just feels very compassionate curiosity is how I want to describe it.
That's a good description.
To just feels like it feels very safe. It's safe. It feels very safe to look from that space.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's not judging. It's not putting any labels on you or any of the rest of us. It's just seeing clearly. And there's an intimacy and a clarity that is very liberating. We think we have to do something with X, Y, or Z, but the seeing clearly does it. Does it?
Yeah.
If we really can come into that dimension of our being that always sees clearly. It just sees what is. It doesn't see with all the judgments and the interpretations and so forth of our conditioned mind. It sees clearly.
And so you said that it takes quite some time to unravel the conditioning. And sometimes I know that there are folks that has happened to, lickety split in an instant, and they suffered greatly before it happened. But I think that what happens often, what I notice is happening often, is that there's a sense that there's someone who needs to be doing something to make the conditioning leave faster. And as I hear you talk, I'm getting the sense that it's just really kind of relax into it and let the conditioning unravel. Is that where you're pointing?
Well, it's seeing conditioning for what it is. I mean, conditioning is conditioning. It's not about a separate me. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you take that identification out of any moment, there's more space around it. And there's a willingness to look into it, and there may be things that want to be seen about our conditioning, but in itself, it's not something we have to identify with, even though it may operate in the life of the body mind, So, my grandparents that I spent quite a bit of time with, and my parents as well, they lived through the Depression. And so there was just a sense of scarcity, and even though there's never been really a great scarcity in my life, I live with that conditioning. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay that for strawberries. It's that kind of, that, and then there's something that just sees it as what it is. It's conditioning. It's not necessarily the truth. So if I want strawberries, then maybe I'll buy them, or whatever. But it's like you know that it's, you know what it is, you know, and it's not, oh, you terrible person, you should be, you know, you should be open and never have those feelings. No, if they're here, then that's what the moment is. But it's just a moment. It's not about a me. And it doesn't mean you don't take responsibility. I mean, I think the more you realize your impact on yourself, number one, and on the world, others, the people in your life, I mean, the more, it's not like you have to be more careful or whatever. It's just that the natural love in your heart wants to flow. You know, it's been bottled up here for lots of us, you know, for however long, you know, we've been afraid of it. And it's been knocking. I always say the love is not out there knocking to come in. Usually it's knocking to flow out. You know, it's on the inside of the heart, just keeps knocking at the door to try to, you know, let itself go. And Adyashanti had a really sweet little invitation some years back that was quite useful. He said, before you have an exchange with somebody, just say a quiet to yourself, I love you. Just a quiet into your inside yourself, you know? We just got cut off, I think.
No, I still see you.
Oh, you do? Okay. So my thing says post attendee Zoom. Maybe I can get rid of that. Am I back? No. I'm still here?
Yeah, we see you.
Oh, okay. Well, my screen is not showing that, but anyway.
Yeah, no, we see you.
Well, good. I
So-
see a few pictures, but mostly I see the sanctuary schedule now.
Huh.
Interesting.
Don't know why.
Me neither. Tech stuff is not my forte.
I'm sure Sina is our sanctuary director, and I'm sure she knows how to fix it. She'll fix that for us, but it may just be a tech thing for now.
Yeah, I think it's, I think somebody called me and wanted to be on FaceTime, is what my computer said, but I didn't answer it. And then it took me out of wherever we are. But anyway, I can still hear you, even though.
Good. Do you see your Zoom camera on the bottom of your screen anywhere?
Yeah.
Click on it. See if it.
Hey,
Hey!
such a simple thing. Oh my gosh, to see somebody knows how to do that. For me, it's.
I honestly just guessed. I guessed for a moment. So
I mean, someone who's as old as I am, you know, we didn't grow up with computers or cell phones or anything like that. You know, it's more challenging for some of us than others. But anyway, here we are.
Fair
I can
enough.
see you quite well now.
Yes, that perfect. So you said the invitation is basically to sit quietly and say, I love you inside.
Oh yeah. Just, you know, and some people that have done this say, oh, I thought I had to actually feel it before I would ever say it. But we're not saying it out there. We're saying it inside just to open the heart. So what happened in my case, when he first, you know, offered that some years back, is I just started saying it about everything. I love you, little dandelion coming up out of the grass. I love you, taxi driver that's driving across the street. I love you, you know, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And then some woman that I worked with, she said, oh my gosh, she said, I can't tell you how many years of therapy I have had trying to be a more loving person. And I've looked at this and that and the other thing. And this little simple thing, I discovered I can love somebody that I don't even like. And see, that's the deal. I mean, unconditional love is just that. It's unconditional. So we can love somebody that we don't like, particularly that we wouldn't want to go to the movies with or whatever. And it's just a possibility for opening the heart to that vibration, that dimension of our being. Yeah.
That is a lovely invitation.
It is, you know, and you can take it anywhere. And it's just an inner thing. But sometimes, you know, we're fearful of opening to love. You know, we've been hurt, or someone that we care about has died, and we think love goes with them. It doesn't. My husband died 7 years ago, and the love hasn't gone anywhere, and the spirit that he was, that he is, that you are, that I am, that spirit is still here, not as a form, but as what we truly are, the formless that for a while, till the rental car wears out, it drives this,
Love that reference. That's beautiful. I want to make sure, I want to make sure that we have time, because I have another question that I'm afraid will take too long. So what I don't want to do is run out of time to ask you about what it is that you currently have going on, opportunities that folks might have who are either listening now or who would listen later to either get to know more about your teaching or to work with you directly, or any sort of programs you have coming up. I was wondering if you might share any of that information with us.
Moon Mountain Sangha, with me, who's the facilitator of these satsangs, we offer satsang once a month on the fourth Tuesday of every month. It's 7 to 9 Pacific time, so that sometimes is late. Although we have one lovely woman gets herself up in England at 2 a.m. or whatever it is to come to satsang. But there's no charge; it's free. If people want to donate via PayPal, we always appreciate that. But that's coming up September 27th, I think, is the fourth Tuesday. Yeah, if that's a Tuesday. Then on the 29th of September until October 3rd, I'm teaching an online retreat. It will meet Thursday night and then twice on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the morning and in the evening. And that's called The Intimacy of True Seeing. So there'll be a lot of experiential invitations to see from this deeper dimension of our being that's not separate from what it's looking at. And then at the end of October, I think it starts October 29th. That's a Friday morning. And then there's 4 sessions of a retreat that I'm doing that Open Circle Center is hosting. And it's called The Play of Presence and Personhood, a Halloween retreat. So we're going to look at the masks that we all wear and what's behind the mask, but also just that play that so many people have issues with or confusion about. Okay, I'm supposed to always just be the presence. Yeah, but the presence is actually also being, this form, this human thing. So anyway, there's that, and then I do talk with people for what in my teacher's tradition is called Dokusan, which is private meeting with a spiritual teacher. I do that by phone. And then there are a couple awakening groups that I facilitate. Those are full at the moment, but that's another thing. But people can, have a private session if you can request that via my website, dorothyhunt.org. And there's a place there you can contact me about anything. I'm also happy to respond when I have time to any questions that one might have, or if you want to share anything about your spiritual journey, I'm happy to engage with you to whatever extent that's possible. And then, of course, these books, and I did bring them just so you'll have a picture of them. But this is called Only This, and this is a hugely long book of poetry. More poems than you'll ever want to read in your whole life. This is a much shorter book of poetry called Leaves from Moon Mountain. And this has beautiful collages inside, things like this, on most every page there's some collage that Roshani Ray did for that book. And then the latest one is Ending the Search. And this is really about the spiritual search and its end, and talks about half the book is kind of prior to awakening, and about half the book is after awakening, and talks about the myths that we have, and anyway, it's got a lot of stuff in it for anyone who's interested. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. I had heard that you were a poet on top of, or that you did write poetry. So that's very exciting. I happen to know several.
The other thing I always forget to mention, because I'm very poor at marketing of any sort. I'm not interested in it. So I even forget this is happening. But there are a number of YouTube videos. There are a couple gap interviews, and there are, Moon Mountain Sangha does have a YouTube channel that has a number of meditations that I've done, and a few satsangs and a little poetry. So anyway, those are usually short. I know people are interested in short.
Fabulous. And may I just ask, the retreat that you mentioned at the end of October, is that in person or is that online?
No, everything's online. Yeah. And they're doing that in the morning early for the people in Europe. So it's like be 9 to 11 Pacific time, the morning session. So people who are in different time zones have more opportunity to come without being bleary-eyed or asleep.
Makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. So, before I ask my last question, because I noticed we only got 4 minutes left.
2 more minutes, yeah.
I want to check and make sure there isn't anyone else who wants to ask a question. I'm going to give them a moment to see if a hand gets raised. Okay, so I think, Dorothy, what would be really helpful would be to know what it is that you would most want to leave us with, just to help us continue to open to what it is that we already are.
Well, question, I don't know if this is the most thing, but I would say question the doubter, the one that doubts that you're awake already, that you are already that which you're seeking. Can you at least take a moment to doubt the doubter, which is another way of saying, inquire. Who am I? What am I really? Do you know? And sometimes, that's not the path for everyone. Sometimes it's a very devotional path. So it's a surrender to the divine in whatever form that seems to take for you. But I would just say, consider the possibility that you are already what you're seeking, and that you don't have to change anything about yourself to be bathed in this love, the love that's already your true nature, the movement of your true nature. It comes out of emptiness. It comes out of the mystery, really. And it's a mystery we can't, if you touch into the deepest dimension, there's no way you can speak about it. There's no way you can write about it, because you're not there. The you who would use words and try to write and everything. So that's just a moment of utter mystery, the unknown. And we don't have to be frightened of the unknown, because it's, in this case, it's profound and it's unspeakable. Mm-hmm. And yet it will show itself to you. It will reveal itself in its own way, in its own time. And it's doing it every minute if we have eyes to see. It's been a real pleasure getting to talk with you, Rhoda. I appreciate the invitation very much.
Well, I cannot, on behalf of, I get to say it on behalf of all the lovely faces in the room, and I cannot tell you so much gratitude for your willingness, your openness, your patience, kindness, just really delightful. Thank you so much, Dorothy.
You are quite welcome. Many blessings to everyone. May you all be well and at peace.
Thank you. You as well. And we'll say good night. Good night now.
Good night.